talking Monster Island. This one is directed and written by Mark Adkins, and this is made by The Asylum. Yes, those crafty Mockbuster merchants are at it again, making another direct-to-TV movie for the Sci-Fi channel. This one, of course, is kind of coming on the heels of the Godzilla King of Monsters movie, and of course we have the low-budget, schlocky version as well. So let's talk about Monster Island. Obviously, you know Asylum, I'm sure, at this point. So you know, basically, they're just trying to make a quick buck, coming off the back of larger blockbusters, and this one is no exception. Having a quick look at the kind of ratings on IMDb and reading some of the reviews, many of the reviews give this one like a 1 out of 10. I actually don't think it's quite that bad. So let's discuss. So the story focuses on this kind of like research company that is doing some type of underwater drilling, and they come across this huge kaiju, and they actually refer to it as a kaiju, which is kind of like a massive starfish, and they inevitably are surprised by this and kind of alarmed. They get the kind of the Navy involved, who is led by the only kind of named actor here that you'll probably recognise, Eric Roberts. Adrian Boucher, he's actually been in a few things. He's kind of your main character here, though. Anyway, so this massive starfish is kind of heading towards kind of the coast of Auckland, I think it is, and they decide that the only way to stop it is to awaken this other sleeping giant to fight. So let's discuss. Okay, so yeah, this is a super low budget film, and we'll come on to negatives, but I do want to touch on some of the positives for me first of all. So one of the things I was surprised that I liked about this movie quite as much was certainly in the first 2 acts, its more scientific approach. So a good portion of this movie is this kind of submersible vehicle, which actually kind of ends up getting stranded on top of this kaiju when it kind of rises from the water and kind of is just sitting on the surface of the water for a while. This small submersible with 4 people in it actually ends up kind of getting kind of stranded on there. And I actually thought, obviously it's a way to kind of save money, kind of you're focusing on the human characters and all that. But I actually kind of quite liked the idea of it to a certain degree, and the kind of how they having to try and figure out ways to escape, and kind of what actually is kind of making this thing tick. And then also kind of when we get back to our mainland, they're just trying to figure out the creature's physiology, and there's a lot of kind of like, obviously precise, sort of gobbledygook and kind of like things like that. But I actually felt the actual portrayal and the kind of the way they kind of, in their at least movie logic, try and kind of like broke down the kind of the scientific aspects of the kind of the creature, I actually thought was quite good. And I didn't think the acting was too bad either. So I actually thought it, for being an incredibly low budget and kind of like, I mean, like the control rooms are literally just 2 joysticks, with a kind of like a bit of cloth behind them, stuff like that. It looks really cheap, and like kind of like Eric Roberts' a Navy uniform is just a hodgepodge of different things. But I actually didn't mind some of the kind of the way the kind of the dialogue is said in regards to some of this kind of like scientific, gobbledygook, and I actually thought it was delivered fairly well by some, not too bad actors, to be quite honest with you. And even the fact that the starfish monster isn't the most exciting of monsters, to me it gave it kind of a little bit of a unique flavour, because we have this kind of small vessel which is essentially trapped on this creature. I don't know. I actually thought it was quite a fun way of kind of getting. They're kind of they're poking their heads out the kind of the hatch and stuff, and we're literally trapped on a giant monster. What are we going to do? I kind of felt it was a somewhat of an original approach, so I actually kind of liked it. And then we have the kind of you'll see 3 monsters in it really. So there's the big starfish. There's the kind of the one at the end. And the starfish lets out these kind of like mini monsters, which for some reason like these bat creatures. And the design of the bat creatures was pretty interesting, I've got to say. Their heads look like they're kind of like almost 2 top half of skulls that are kind of clapped together. And I actually quite liked the design of those. I thought they were quite good. And they probably have the best CGI, I would say. Yeah. So, but what doesn't work with this movie? Obviously, it's super cheap. I mean, like I've mentioned kind of some of the set design here. some of the kind of like just the costuming and stuff like that, and yeah, it's just mega cheap, and the CGI as well, for the most part, is predictably kind of poor. But like I said, there are elements here that I do like with the CG. And I've got to say, I think the third act of this movie is definitely the weakest. And when the kind of the eggs start hatching, it just goes into silly mode. And it kind of any kind of credibility that it might have had with the kind of the sort of more scientific kind of like part of the first part of the movie is thrown out the window for pure schlocky silliness in the kind of the latter portion of this movie, and it just goes into some silly things. The also, I have to point out that Climax is incredibly anticlimactic. The kind of the big showdown between our two titans is incredibly anticlimactic. I'm assuming they just didn't have the budget to kind of animate a particular kind of like fight between these two like, massive creatures, and they've just kind of like devised a way for it to kind of end in a really unsatisfying manner, I have to say. And it kind of hints to a larger kind of mythology where there's, you know, once again there's all these titans, blah 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 blah. But overall, I mean, it's not a great film by any stretch of the imagination, and yes, you don't see a lot of the creatures on screen, but I did find the characters fairly compelling, and I actually quite liked our main character played by Adrian Boucher, who is this kind of like slightly morally ambiguous guy. You know, he's a kind of like a private business owner. You think he's going to be the bad guy, but he seems to have some, you know, an altruistic side as well. I quite like that. I actually quite like some of the kind of the kind of location shooting here, particularly in the kind of the latter half. It kind of takes place in this kind of what looks to be some type of volcanic level. That was quite good, and the photography wasn't too bad. So I don't think it's quite as bad as maybe some people would say. But it's you know, if you're expecting a huge monster smackdown, all of these sci-fi movies always find a way to kind of like have the story more based on the human side of things. I did appreciate this movie not having the typical kind of, oh, we'll have a human bad guy to kind of like pad out the running time. They found other ways to try and you know, to try and kind of tell a story with a human element. But I always think it's lame where we're not interested in the human, like, you know, the Russian spy or whatever that they have in some of these films. And I quite like the fact this one doesn't have that. All the kind of human drama actually stems from the creatures themselves, even though the creatures aren't on screen a lot. I don't think it's that bad, if I'm honest. For a B movie, I'd give it a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.